September 3rd, in a rundown building outside of Detroit. A soft glow from a television fills the room. The day wears on until it lasts. Tales to the Void presents Ghost Warding with a Smile.
This is Bailey & Co., Ghost Warding with a Smile, guaranteed. What can I do for you today? As I said the company motto, my insides twisted together in what felt like the aftermath of a bad fish dinner. When I first started this company, I had dreams of owning a fleet of warders, with clients all over Michigan and secretaries that would answer the phone for me. What I got was a beaten down building on the outskirts of Detroit, with nothing but cockroaches for company. Hello, my name is Maggie Robble. I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm having issues with a ghost inside my house. The previous owner said that he had the house cleansed before we moved in, but I think he was lying. That's okay, these things can happen. Don't you have a protector around? No, I'm afraid I don't. My family has a streak of longevity going back to my great-grandparents. It's a shame, really. I know a couple of family members would benefit from the work. I know a certain ward that would appreciate the help, too. I tried to mutter under my breath. What was that? Her voice was questioning, but sounded on the edge of anger. I started to backpedal and put some cheer back in my voice. I didn't say anything, ma'am. That ghost must be in pretty good to be affecting your phone lines. You have seen him, correct? A momentary pause, but then she started describing the ghost. Yes, I have. He's a young man, looks to be in his late 20s. He has on suspenders with jeans, a large beard, and seems to be listening to a cassette player? I think he's from the early 90s or something. He's a hipster, ma'am. They're all the rage right now. Just tell me where you live and I'll send someone over right away. I felt myself begin to zone out as I wrote down her address. Her house was at least an hour out from the shop, but sitting on my ass didn't pay the bills. I found myself wishing I enjoyed this job as much as I did when I was younger. Busting ghosts stopped being fun after the 5th grade. Hell, in some cities you could barely walk outside without spotting a ghost causing some kind of mischief. I understood the woman's concerns, of course. Getting a ghost inside would cause a ton of trouble for her. Banging pots, squirrely electronics, cold spots, and heat spikes on a whim. If she tried to ignore it, everything would just get worse. But why did she call me? Crap! I yelled to my empty office. My curse quickly echoed back at me from the garage in the front of the building. The only things sitting there were my uniform, a couple gallons of holy water, some bells, assorted bags of herbs, and my car. She was a darling little hatchback that I found on the side of the road and fixed. She had been in a pretty bad crash and had taken some effort on my part, but I was able to get her home. From there, it just took a bit of TLC, and Clarissa and I were good to go. I got up and wandered over to my supplies to grab my usual kit. I thought about leaving my uniform, but decided it would be better to at least pretend I was a professional. I threw everything in Clarissa's trunk and headed out to Miss Robble's home. Along the way, I looked back on how I had gotten to where I was. I always liked to blame my dad for becoming a ward. It's tough not to follow in the family business, especially when you're following one of the best. Really, it was my own fault. I just picked this career because it was easy for me. Growing up around this stuff made it second nature. Hell, I graduated top of my class from Casper's Craft School and Warder Studies. Looking back, I would have been better off with a business degree. The drive was just as boring as I thought it would be, maybe even worse because I got caught in traffic. Not once, twice. I considered charging extra for that little inconvenience. By the time I reached our neighborhood, it was early evening. As I pulled up to the old Victorian, I had to give some props. Miss Robble had one hell of a house. It was newly whitewashed with wooden panels on the front porch. The house had to have at least 15 windows that I could see, each one of them large enough to let passersby see inside the well-furnished interior. Before I went to talk to Miss Robble, I checked the grounds for a ward circle. Older houses tended to be built without them, relying more on family remedies or traditions to keep the ghosts out. Those methods worked fine as long as people actually believed in what they were doing and kept up on the cleansings. Replace the old traditions, people looked for modern solutions to keep their homes free of a spectral infestation. A great example being the warding circle. Didn't matter if it was made of holy water, salt, or even toothpaste. As long as it remained unbroken, you were safe. The circle represented the holy power of ancient times, when pagans were using them to cast magic spells and call up their gods for help. Even if the ring wasn't made by a believer, ghosts still couldn't cross it. Most folks thought it was because the ghosts had it ingrained in their nature that rings had power they couldn't compete against. Occultists still weren't totally sure on that one. In the past, most business didn't care if they had a ghost or two, but as we moved forward and started relying on technology more, ghosts started to become a bigger problem. So building contractors started making warding circles standard in their builds. As long as the circle didn't break, the building would remain ghost-free, guaranteed. I circled the house and found the pipe I was looking for. It was maybe 4 inches above the ground with a black cap over it. The name of the company, Spectralic, stood out against the black background. With the cap off, I could see the strip of LED lights that disappeared deeper into the tube. The end of the strip lay dimly at the opening. I flipped the tiny switch that stood out next to the opening. A light blinked on and started moving slowly down the length of the strip. Almost a minute later, the light came back around and blinked off. I flipped the switch before the circuit could restart. Nothing wrong with the circle then. Spectralic must not have cleansed the house before putting the ring in. I went over to Clarissa for my stuff. She popped her trunk open for me and I grabbed what I needed. My uniform, like most wards, was based off of clerical clothing. It was a white shirt with 2 black stripes going down the front and back, and 3 thin horizontal lines on both arms. I had Bailey Ghost Warder embroidered on the front in shining gold letters. I tucked the shirt into my work pants and clipped my belt on. It had the small stuff, like holy water and sage bundles. I had a bell attached to the buckle so that I could dispel negative energy without having to carry it around in my hand. The only problem was I sounded like a damn cat when I walked around. The outfit was one of the first things I bought when I started my company, and to be honest, I was really proud of it. The only reasons I hated wearing it was because the damn company that made it had sent me an extra large. The stupid thing was so big, it looked like a child that had stolen his father's shirt. I could fit 2 of me inside it, and every time I moved my arms, the giant sleeves would get in my way. I had tried dozens of times to get a new one sent over, and each time I had been snuffed by some representative or another. I grabbed the excess fabric in my hands and walked up to Ms. Robble's door. Only a few seconds passed between my knock and the door opening. Miss Robble was dressed in a pair of black slacks and a light blue blouse. Her graying hair was done up in a tight bun with a pair of little chopsticks holding it together. Miss Robble? Hello, I'm Winston Bailey. You called me about possibly having a ghost problem? Yes, I did. Please, come in, she said tiredly. I'm getting very sick of this hypster in my home. The way she missaid hipster showed her age more than her hair did. Where is he now? I asked, stepping inside. He's in the basement trying to go through my old record collection. That does not surprise me. I turned towards her, getting serious for a minute. Before I get started, I'd like to ask you a few personal questions about your situation, if you don't mind. She put her hand under her chin and crossed the other under her elbow. Whatever will help you get rid of him. Great. Now tell me, how long have you lived here? It's been about 3 years now? This is the first time I've ever had any kind of infestation. I had the ring put in right after we moved in. I tapped my chin. That's all good, but did you get the house cleansed before you put the ring down? The previous owner said they were going to take care of that, she said, a bit more defensive than I expected. Guess we know how he got in then. If they had actually done what they said they were going to do, you wouldn't have this problem. If he's been here the whole time, how come he hasn't done anything until now? Haunting isn't always immediately obvious, I explained. They can be lodged into a location for years, quietly existing without ever fully affecting the world around them. We know that negative energy is the fuel these creatures need to cause their mischief. If there is plenty of positive energy, or you don't spend much time here, then it's likely that the ghost has been unable to absorb enough energy to do anything. Has anything happened recently that could be fueling him? She began to wring her hands while her gaze shifted over to a small picture on the wall. I followed her eyes and saw it was of two people. One was obviously Miss Robble, while the other was a man with his arm around her shoulder, pulling her in tight. Broad smiles covered both of their faces. My husband and I have having a very rough time of it recently. Her voice hitched up slightly as she spoke. We can't seem to agree on anything anymore. Even sharing a room together is almost impossible without a fight breaking out. We're taking some time apart right now to see if a little distance will help. She lowered herself into a nearby armchair. Never in 23 years has something like this happened to us. In my mind, I couldn't help but think that sometimes shit like this happened, and people just grew apart. On the outside, I was much more sympathetic. I'm sorry to hear about your troubles. I placed my hand lightly on her shoulder for what I hoped seemed like support. She looked up at me with a sad look. I'll start the process of cleansing your house right away. Hopefully with this ghost out, you and your husband will have something positive to look forward to. One can only hope. Thank you, she said quietly. Score one for the boys back home, I thought. Ms. Robble wiped at her eyes and changed the subject. I haven't seen a warder in action before, so you'll have to forgive me if this is a dumb question, but will you use magic to help you? I waved my hand in the air as I pulled supplies off of my belt. Oh no, ma'am. I tend to avoid using it. Does that mean you're an invoker? I hear that type of magic can be pretty useless, she asked abruptly. Invoking isn't useless, you slag. It's nuanced and requires way more thought than those power-tripping evokers ever use. My thoughts raged in my head for a second longer before I responded. I'm sorry, let me clarify. I know plenty about magic and can use it well enough. I've just never really needed it for my line of business, when a simple bag of herbs can do the job just as well. I tapped the bag I had pulled out for emphasis. I'm about to get started, Miss Robble. You can stay and watch if you like, but I ask that you don't disturb me. She gave me a confused look, and I started explaining why I wanted her out before she could get offended. It's nothing personal, I said coolly. I just work best when I'm concentrating. I'm sure you don't want me here all day smudging herbs on your windows and saying prayers. Her expression turned to one of understanding as she stood up. All right, then. I'll be in my office upstairs if you need anything. Alone, I quickly got to work. First thing to do was open up all the windows on the first floor, give that negative energy a place to flow out of. Next, ring my little bell in every room to disrupt the energy's hold. After that was done, I set the bag of herbs on fire inside a stone smudging bowl I had. The bag was filled with sage, cedar, and sweetgrass. Each one of them was used in blessings and protection rituals all over the U.S. Other wards like to use myrrh or lavender, but those were more popular in Europe. I grew up around sweetgrass and sage, so I stuck with them. The fire burned itself out in the bowl. A small pile of sweet-smelling ash was all that was left of the bag. I took a little bit in my hand and smudged it across all the windows I had opened earlier. With the area cleansed and all the negative energy inside fully disrupted, I headed downstairs to deal with the main problem. The basement was an unfinished concrete square full of random boxes, holiday decoration, and some dusty gym equipment. From the stairs, I spotted the ghost of the hour. The soft blue glow of its aura emanated from in front of a set of boxes deeper in the basement. His aura gave off enough light for me to get a good look at him. He looked a little older than 25, was wearing suspenders attached to his jeans, like Miss Robble said, and a deep V-neck t-shirt. His hair was hidden under a wool beanie that looked like it was barely hanging onto his head. A curly mustache gave the finishing touch. I decided to nickname him Gabe. To get an exorcism to work required faith, a strong belief in what you were trying to accomplish and your methods in doing it. Some warders believed that their job helped move the ghosts on to the next part of their cosmic journey. Others leaned on their religion to give them strength. I was fueled by more selfish desires, specifically the ones that enjoyed getting paid. Hey, you hipster fuck. You're supposed to move on when you die, not stick around. Go pack up your accordion, hop on your penny farthing, and get ready for a one-way trip to wherever I send you fucks. Gabe whipped his head back from the records, a fair amount of anger in his eyes. Aside from being mostly intangible and dead, ghosts were still pretty human. They felt emotions and were able to get angry like anyone else. Instead of trying to kill me, though, the worst a ghost could do was mess with my phone's reception or give me a case of bad luck. Rarely was a person met with the opportunity to mouth off so cruelly without repercussions. So I took every chance I got to do just that. I thought of it as a perk of the job. That's right, you gluten-free, mustache-waxing pain in my ass. I'm here to evict you. Before I do, though, I've got to understand. Did you dress like that because everyone else was doing it? Or did you always look like an idiot? He started throwing his hands around while his mouth opened and closed violently. Charades really wasn't my thing, but my best guess was he was trying to make me understand why he cut gluten out of his life. Or that I wouldn't understand him because I was too mainstream. I pulled out my holy water and popped the cork. Yeah, that's what I figured. An exorcism was all about creating an environment that the ghost couldn't exist in. Splashing holy water at them was a great way to disrupt their form, which made them more susceptible to a wave of positive energy. That was where the chant came in. A chant could be prayers from the Bible, sayings that held meaning to you, or the catchphrase of your favorite TV star. It didn't matter what, as long as the words you said gave you the feeling of joy and confidence. Positive emotions begot positive energy. Relinquori domo istim canes, relinquori domo istim canes, relinquori domo istim canes. Relinquori domo istim canes, relinquori domo istim canes, relinquori domo istim canes. People always figured my chant was some biblical phrase or whatever. I never felt the need to correct them. I chanted non-stop and splashed the ghost periodically with holy water. Every time the water struck him, his form flickered in and out. He tried to fight against it, but there was little he could do. I started to hear a rattling behind me, like something was shaking everything in the basement at once. I tried to ignore it, but suddenly the ghost's head shot up. It made a silent howl of pain, his jaw extending unnervingly far. Every one of his limbs splayed out, spasming back and forth. I'd never seen anything like this before, and it broke my concentration. My chant died in my throat and my arm froze in front of me, holy water held out like an offering. The ghost's aura began changing colors, from light blue to a much darker red. He finally stopped screaming, and slowly, his limbs lowered to hang lazily next to his body. I ran through every scenario in my head at what could be happening, but nothing came up. He looked down at me, and I knew I was in trouble. Hey, pal. You know all that stuff I said about being a hipster fuck? You think I could take that back? I was going for a joke, but what squeaked out of my throat sounded more like a beg for mercy. He flashed me a grin and flicked his wrist across his chest from left to right. I was trying to figure out what that little gesture meant until a box crashed into my left side. Actually, crashed wasn't a strong enough word to describe what happened. I think blasted me off my feet was far more appropriate. I landed hard on my side while pots and pans clattered around me, a few banging against my body along the way. My side hurt so much I was sure a bone had cracked. If none had, then I had at least gotten a permanent bruise. Speaking became difficult thanks to Gabe's sudden attack, but I had to stall him somehow. That was pretty good, I wheezed out. Though I'd be happy if we didn't do that again. As I spoke, I slid my hand down to the pouch on my belt that held my extra holy water. His head turned from me to a set of 20-pound free weights that were laying nearby. He raised his hand in the air and the weights followed suit. It didn't take a rocket scientist to know what he planned to do with those. The weights floated over to where I was laying, floating a good 3 feet above me. One over my head, the other over my chest. The predatory grin on his face showed he was about to enjoy this. I tensed up for the drop. Those weights look a little heavy for me. Think you could grab some 5s instead? His hand began to move downward, and I took that as my cue. I rolled over to the side in time so the weights only crashed into the concrete. From the noise they made, I figured that they embedded themselves pretty deep. Getting out of the way was only the first step. I flung the small bottle of holy water at the ghost, cap off so that the entire bottle would empty at once, and got to my feet. The ghost's body faded in and out, but only for a second. Before I knew it, he was back in full form and completely pissed off. He lifted his hands in the air and everything that wasn't nailed down started rising up and heading in my direction. I rushed to the stairs as the maelstrom of boxes and household items crashed around me. Miss Robble poked her head down through the doorway at the top of the steps. "Is everything all right?" "Out of the way!" I yelled as I barreled towards the door. Her eyes opened wide as she saw what was coming and moved back into the hallway. I leapt through and slammed it shut, locking and barricading it with my body. I felt the door pushing against my back as Gabe crashed against it with his makeshift weapons. "What have you done? Why is my basement trying to kill you?" Miss Robble screeched. I took a moment to collect myself. "First off, I'd just like you to know that I am very good at my job. The fault here is with the ghost and not me. Secondly, your basement is trying to kill me because it seems your ghost has developed a nasty case of telekinesis." I tried to remain calm for her, but it felt my heart beating like mad. "Well, what do you plan to do about it? Are you very attached to this house? I only ask because, frankly, I think we should just give it to him." "I will not give up my home to some spectral creep. I hired you to do a job, so do it!" I felt my eardrum readying to burst as Miss Robble screamed in my ear. "Fine," I yelled back, letting my professionalism fall to the wayside. "Get out of your house and outside the circle. Find a place to hide out there until I'm done." She looked ready to make another comment until a bowling pin launched through the wooden door between us, leaving a gaping hole filled with the ghost's red glow. At the sight of the door giving way, Miss Robble made a beeline out of the house. As I watched her go, more objects began puncturing the door. I dove to one side in time to avoid a set of kitchen knives meant for my heart. With how this job is going, I doubted my cleansing of the floor would slow the ghost down much. I booked up for the front door, hoping Gabe would break through too soon. As I reached the open front door, my meager barrier exploded in a wooden shrapnel. I didn't want to slow down and look back at the ghost as he crested the stairs. I jumped off the front porch and onto the grass. I hit the ground with all my momentum and rolled past where I knew the ring was underground. I put my hands on my knees and took a moment to breathe. I didn't care how powerful this ghost was. There was no way it could pass a ring. The ghost made its way through the front door. Gabe's color had shifted now to completely black, and his form had become a little more than a cloud of malignant energy. All that remained of his previous shape was a pair of red eyes that locked directly onto me. "You can't get me over here, you asshole," I sneered. As I felt myself lift off the ground, a sense of irony washed over me. Then it changed to a sense of flying as I was thrown backwards towards my car. I hit so hard that I left an impression in the driver's door. I was in a lot of pain, but I was aware enough to see that the ghost was still stuck inside the ring. Even though I could barely breathe without wanting to pass out, I started to stagger to my feet. My legs finally got under me in time to feel the ground shake. At first I thought it was the pain making me dizzy, but then I noticed that it was coming from the house. As Gabe's eyes met mine, he stared me down with so much hatred and evil, I actually felt my heart seizing. The metal ring slowly rose out of the ground before shooting into the sky. Dirt, grass, and concrete flew up with the mangled piece of metal that had been the only thing separating me from a painful death. It came down more a ball than a ring. No longer restricted to the circle, Gabe started towards me again. Along the way, he picked up all the nearby debris. Trees and plants leaned in towards him, getting pulled in by his telekinetic power. Running out of time and options, I did the only thing I could think of. I called for help. "Clarissa!" I yelled as I slammed the roof of my car with a closed fist. My sister's spirit rose up from the hood of my car. Her long hair, braided into a ponytail, remained completely still in the telekinetic storm. She lifted up her head and gave me a quick once-over. I saw her face shift from confusion to pure rage as she put together what had happened to me. As both my sister and my protector spirit, nothing pissed her off more than seeing me in trouble. Gabe stopped moving towards me after I called Clarissa out, and was still a good 20 feet away. She leapt from my car, arms stretched forward, and started attacking him. Ghosts were as physical to each other as humans were to one another. They couldn't dispel other ghosts, but they could still wail on each other enough to make them leave. Clarissa went at the other ghost hard. After her initial lunge, she began raining blows on him, and whenever he tried to wrap around her, she just turned his own momentum against him. While she was putting her MMA experience to good use, it was only a matter of time before she was overwhelmed by Gabe's more powerful form. As the two duked it out, I jumped into my car, or as close to jumping as my battered body could do. I grabbed a couple sage bags and a gallon of holy water. All I had left to find was my chalk box. I pushed through the empty fast food bags and rosary beads, looking for the chalk. I hadn't used it for a few months, and only remembered that it was somewhere in the back seat. My massive sleeves kept getting in the way, and I was about to try and rip them off when the car was rocked over to one side. I had to hold on to the seat or risk being flung into the opposite door. I looked out the window and saw that Clarissa had been whipped into the car, right next to the impression I left earlier. She was still mad, but now that the other ghost had shown his fangs, she was being more careful. She pushed off the car and began circling the ghost, her hands up, ready to strike or grapple if he tried anything she didn't like. "Come on, you son of a bitch, where are you?" I yelled as I moved over to the car's trunk. I found the box sitting snugly next to my uniform's case. "Typical," I said as I grabbed the box and shifted out of the car. A quick look at the ghost showed that I hadn't much time left. Clarissa was on the defensive as Gabe threw out blow after blow. Since he didn't have a human form anymore, it looked more like Clarissa was fighting an angry octopus. Each blow was coming in from a different angle, and it took all of her focus not to get overwhelmed. I found a bit of road that was flat enough and began drawing out an exorcist circle. I left the preliminary ring unfinished and quickly started drawing the runes out along it. Each one of them was meant as a proper ward against ghosts, taken from dozens of different cultures and traditions. They stood for just about every positive thing around, from tranquility to good luck. Once the runes were finished, I placed a sage bag at each of the cardinal directions and lit them on fire. Next, I poured a bunch of holy water inside the ring, making sure that none of it interfered with the chalk or burning bags. I concentrated on all the energy within the circle and started augmenting it with my magic. The bags burned brighter, the runes glowed softly, and even the surrounding air seemed to be giving off vibrations of energy. The kind of magic that I learned was meant to enhance, rather than create. While some folks were able to make flames appear in their hands, I focused on turning a small spark into a raging inferno. This was me going nuclear on Gabe. With everything ready, all I needed to finish it up was for the ghost to get inside. It had to be within the ring before I could close it properly. Otherwise, all I would have done was make a pretty circle in the road. My mind raced for ideas of getting him inside until the obvious answer showed itself. "Clarissa, toss him over!" I yelled at her, pointing toward the ring on the ground. She was in the midst of struggling under the other ghost's mask when she heard me. She nodded once, then focused back on the nastiness trying to envelop her. I could see her face as she struggled to get a hold of Gabe. His arms were entangling her around her waist, legs, and neck. If she were alive, I had no doubt he would have already strangled her to death. He tried moving his tentacles around to get a better hold of her and released one of her arms. It was the chance she needed. Clarissa flung her arms up in the air, knocking him off balance for a second and forcing his grasp to loosen. While he tried to get his arms around her again, she took her opportunity and pummeled the ever-living shit out of him. He made a desperate grab at her again, but she swung inside his grip and judo threw him into the circle. I watched as his writhing black mass flew over my head. I closed the circle once he was inside and started breathing again. He was completely trapped. I put my hands together in front of me and concentrated on the ring. My eyes closed, my mind busy visualizing the movement of energy inside the ring against his negative form. The ghost tried throwing his power out of the ring to slam into me. "No one fools me twice, you ectoplasmic cocksucker." I began chanting a proper Latin exorcism instead of my usual bullshit, putting my full faith into every word I uttered, blocking every other sensation or thought, focusing solely on the words I was saying and what I wanted to happen. My magic mixed and built upon the positive energy I was creating, mingling with my words and emotions. It turned the ring from a small stream of energy into a raging torrent. He thrashed and lunged inside the cage as I focused the energy against him. Clarissa put her hand on my shoulder in support. Her part of this was done. It was all up to me. After several minutes of battling, his power started to fade. His energy flaked off of him in waves, and every crash of positive energy I sent against him took just as much negative with it. Soon enough, all that was left of the ghost was an empty holy ring and a ton of property damage. I released the tension in my body and lay down in the road. I put my hand in the air for a high five and felt Clarissa smack it with hers. Protector spirits were able to touch the people they were bound to. For everyone else, they were just a typical ghost, and the usual rules applied. "Nice job, Nuke," I said, using her old MMA nickname. She always got a little mad at me for calling her that, but I thought it was pretty cool. "How about next time you just beat the ghost up instead of making me do all the work, eh?" In response, she put her foot on my chest and pushed down, hard. Clarissa mostly abused her abilities as my protector to bruise me up. "Ugh!" I wheezed. "Damn it, lady! I almost went through my car earlier. Go easy on me." She gave me an unsympathetic look and flipped me the bird in response to my complaining. "I'm just gonna leave you in the car next time." Her other hand joined the first. Looking past her upturned fingers, I noticed that her normally clean clothes had been dirtied up and torn from the fight. Even her form seemed less corporeal than it usually did, with certain areas of her body more transparent than others. "You better take a break for a bit. Looks like you got pretty banged up," I said, gesturing at her body. She leaned her head back and gave me a quick once-over before giving me a "what can you do" shrug. Her body began to fade, and I could see tiny wisps of energy fly towards my car. She would probably spend the next day or two resting inside of it. A protector spirit's fetter was their safe zones. When they were inside, the object was just shy of invincible and could only be exercised through the most intense means possible. Not that they could just haunt whatever object was around, though. It had to have a real connection to them. A cherished piece of jewelry, a holy item, or, in Clarissa's case, the object of their demise. I laid back down on the ground and stared up at the night sky. A couple of clouds drifted across, blocking out most of the stars. A few would poke out from time to time, only to quickly be covered up once more. I took a moment to relax and let what had happened pass over me. As my mind moved through the events of the day, the same question kept popping up. How the fuck was any of that possible?
Tales to the Void is a collection of stories written and performed by Jake McFlitty. Music and production by Robert Labadie. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed. Until next time.